You all join palms. And repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
Keeping the palms joined. Put the palms down. All right, good evening, everybody. Nice to see you all here. Thanks for showing up. Somebody just walked in, and someone who's been here too for like a couple years, I feel like, and they're here like 5 days a week, and they just walked in and they said, hey, what is your, I was just coming in, and they said, what is your class in there about? And it was actually funny to me because I feel like I see them almost every day, so I never realized they hadn't sat in here, and I won't embarrass this person and point out who they are. But they said, what is your class about? And my immediate reaction was, I have no idea. And, it reminds me of, I share this story, actually I share all my stories a lot, but years ago there was an interview I saw somebody doing a Zen retreat somewhere, a Zen center somewhere, wherever it was, doesn't matter. And they were filming a little kind of documentary piece. And so they're interviewing these folks, and the person doing the interviewing turned to the, talking to this person, and they said, what's your life like here? What's your schedule, et cetera? And the person said, well, we get up at 3:30 in the morning, and they kind of went on and on about their routine. And the guy conducting the interview said, why do you wake up at 3:30 in the morning? And the guy got a big smile on his face and looked at him and said, I have no idea. And I thought it was a really beautiful, it's one of the most beautiful clips I'd ever seen. I don't know where I saw it. I've never seen it again. For all I know, I just imagined it. But, it's a really great opportunity to just recognize that, we put ourselves in situations in life, and we often have these grand expectations about how it's supposed to work out, how it's supposed to go, what we want to happen, right? We give something to somebody, we want something in return. We do something for somebody, we want something in return. We go places, we want something in return. Our entire life is like transactional. Without even really noticing it, that's our entire life. And in many situations, it doesn't really bother us, when was the last time you went to a grocery store and you went to check out and you're paying for your oranges and whatever else you bought, and they tell you how much it is, and then you argue with them? No, you just pay for your groceries. Right? You go to a restaurant. So we're in constant transaction mode with everything. Some things we don't even think twice about it, and some things it bothers us. It just really depends. But there are very few things in our lives where it's not about a transaction. It's not about this exchange. It's not about giving and getting anything in return. It's just about being present with life as it arises. And to me, that's the heart of Buddhist teachings, is learning to be with life as it arises and as it occurs. And being okay with things as they arise. And that doesn't mean what's arising is pleasant or fun or even right. There's a lot of disgusting things going on in this world every single moment. So being okay with things as they arise doesn't mean you shouldn't stop fighting for what you believe, or that everything that's going on in the world is okay, because it's not. But can you see what's going on and learn to be with life as it arises? And kind of come out of this transaction mode. The Bodhisattva teachings, Bodhisattva means enlightened being. The practice is no gift, no giver, no receiver. And this idea of never expecting anything from anyone, ever, has been, for me, a life-changing practice for a very long time. And I'm not suggesting that it's easy or fun to do, because we have these kind of ideas of what we think we deserve and what we expect and how people should be towards us, right? You can want people to be a certain way towards you. Nothing wrong with that. Unless you're not okay when they're different, which is going to be pretty much every day of your life. The world is not going to revolve around how you want it to, in case you haven't figured that out by now. But if all of you packed in here on a Tuesday night, you've probably figured that out by now. Because you're here, because life doesn't work how you want it to. And when it doesn't work, we get sad, we get angry, we get depressed, we get stressed, we get anxious. That's what happens. So we seek and crave something to make everything better, which is really backwards from what this practice is about. This practice is about recognizing that life is occurring. And if we can observe life as it occurs and not be so triggered and flustered by it, then maybe our minds and hearts will be more pleasant. But it's a practice, it's not easy. So, with that, we'll sit. For those who are joining virtually, welcome, glad you're here, thanks for showing up. Feel free as you are to say hello in the chat box somewhere on the screen there. For those who are here for the first time, a couple things to tell you before we begin the meditation practice. Nothing's going to happen to you, right? You're not going to float away. You're not going to have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Don't judge your practice, meaning don't ask yourself, is this working or not working? Are you doing it right or wrong? We're just going to sit, we're going to breathe. You'll hear sounds inside, sounds outside. This is life. Life is filled with chaos. And this practice is learning to get quiet and stay within all of the chaos. Posture, you just want to be comfortable. If you're on a cushion, often it helps. Slide into the front third, pushing the stomach forward. Same thing if you're on a bench or chair, however you're seated. Just trying to sit upright, relaxing the shoulders. Hands are on the knees or lap, whatever's comfortable. If you are sitting for the first time, it's important to know your mind is not going to shut off. You're not going to go blank. You're not going to think nothing. You'll continue to wander and race with your mind and thoughts. I'll say things periodically to wake you up or bring you back to present moment. If you need to move, simply move. I'll guide us as we begin, and we'll settle into a little bit of silence. Most important, do not expect anything. We're just going to sit and breathe. And starting with your eyes closed if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed, whatever's comfortable. Start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And eventually, settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Start with gently guiding the attention, focus, to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice, observing sensation of breath. As the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it. Release that thought. Return attention, focus to the breath. letting go of expectations, letting go of judgments from the practice, just sitting, breathing. Learning to be comfortable in stillness, in quiet, wanting nothing but to sit and breathe. And with the body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, and the mind learning to settle. Know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do. Nowhere else to go. And no one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. Once again, taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And when ready, slowly opening the eyes, slowly beginning to move. And most important, the practice of meditation is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. And ask yourselves how you'd prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, and still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, it's nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how we sit and hold the hands or cross the legs. It's nothing to do with the sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It's everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external situation. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samutpata, dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakened. He was a human being, no different than any one of us, who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. And what that means, very simply, for all of us, regardless where you come from or what you believe in or where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen. You react. More stuff happens. more reactions. That's it. This practice is simply learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most of us, the way you responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how you respond to every other 20-minute period of your day. And so all we're working on is closing the gap to where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful. Whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. It's not an easy practice. It's not necessarily fun. It's not an escape, as often people think it is. It's direct perception into the present moment. And as I spoke about earlier, the present moment is often incredibly difficult. Meditation is free. Buddhist practice is free. It's sitting, breathing, learning to be kind to yourself and everybody else you encounter every moment of your life. Once we stop trying to change, fix, control, manipulate everything and everyone around us, and we work on changing our mind and our reaction to the world around us, life gets simpler. But it's a practice. It requires tremendous patience. It never changes. Every day of your life, you will have conflict, challenges, and difficulties. And every day of your life, you'll have things that go exactly how you want them to. At least for like 3 seconds. To me, this practice is very simple. I don't like to complicate it. The simple practice is hard enough. Think good thoughts, speak good words, do good deeds. That's it. When we can bring that into our day, even just a little bit more than we do now, things change. When we can not attach so much to all of our expectations and desires for how we want the world to be, we feel a little more pleasant. So much of our time is spent, as I spoke about earlier, wanting something back. And this practice is giving time, attention, heart, smile, an ear. I mean, not literally, but... And that's it. Learning to be kind and generous to yourself is also incredibly important. And for many people who show up to this stuff, that's been a very big challenge for a lot of the people that end up in spaces like this. Practicing loving kindness and compassion, forgiveness towards yourself. And that also should be a daily practice. Because I've found from sitting in Sangha and community all these years that if people would learn to bring a sense of kindness and forgiveness into their life, then a lot of the other things that they actually see as problems maybe fall away. A lot of our actions, our thoughts, our words, our deeds that are driven by anger and hatred towards the self decrease. Because then we're not driven by that anger and hatred so much. But if you're coming from a place of anger and hatred all day long, then those are the actions that will most likely follow. So if we can learn to have forgiveness towards ourselves and patience towards ourselves, then stop doing as much stuff that harms ourselves and harms others. So with that, I'll pause. For me, always, I just prefer to respond to questions. Meditation, Buddhist practice, anything you're sitting with. And we'll use the rest of our brief time this evening, and I'll respond to questions. And for those who are joining virtually, again, welcome. Glad you're here. Feel free as you are. There's a chat box somewhere on your screen. Feel free if you have any questions to put them there, and I'll do my best to respond. So we'll open up to questions.
What is the quickest way to identify if a motive is coming from ego? And can you distinguish between the different drags of ego? We have a superficial ego and then a spiritual ego. Quickest way to spot it.
So the question, to paraphrase for those joining virtually that didn't hear, is in essence, what is the quickest way to identify if something is coming from ego? Right?
Yes.
It's always coming from ego. I know that doesn't help you at all. So let me just start with this, because this kind of question or that line of thinking has come up a couple times recently, where very often, and I don't, knowing you a little bit, I know you weren't necessarily coming from this place, but for those who might be new, very often people think that like, oh, Buddhism, you must get rid of your ego. I mean, that's the most egotistical thing there is, right? I mean, when I started in this practice, I was like, I'm going to shatter my ego and I'm going to be the best at getting rid of my ego. Like, that's all ego, right? So, for me as a practitioner, what I learned is the ego is not going anywhere anytime soon, right? But how does it play out in my life? How does my ego, how can I use it to be a benefit? How have I or can I use it to be of harm? Right? So I just wanted to start there that the ego is always going to be there. Right? But I think the question that I would look at in your question is, when I am acting, in however I'm acting, body, speech, mind, thoughts, words, actions, right? Is it coming from a place of attachment to self, what I want, what I need, what I think is best for me? Or is it coming from a place of, what do they want? What do they need? What's best for them? And everything, which is really in your question, for me, I always talk about the heart of this practice really is about understanding the intention behind our thoughts, words, and actions. And for those who don't know, that's karma. The word karma means action. It's not what goes around comes around. It's not getting what you deserve. It literally translates to action, and action is what we bring into our lives. Karma is what we bring into our lives. It's generated, as the Buddha taught, 3 ways: body, speech, mind. What we think, what we say, and what we do. So our entire lives is just filled with moment after moment after moment of thinking, speaking, and doing. Or thinking, communicating, and doing. However that plays out. So in those moments and expressions of karma, body, speech, and mind, what is the intention behind it? Is it to benefit self? Is it to benefit others? Is it both? And so I think not coming from a place of like judging, oh, I'm terrible at it or I'm good at it, but just the awareness. And as you continue to focus on the awareness of what your intention is, then that helps you begin to see where to shift and use the ego differently. So I don't know if that's helpful at all, but what else? Yeah.
Could you talk about physical pain and I think it was something you had said years ago about arrows?
Oh, yeah.
And like adding to it.
Yeah. So physical pain is something I said years ago about arrows. Physical pain sucks, right? I would have said that years ago also. And the teaching called the second arrow from the Buddhist teachings is that, so first arrow is, say, physical pain. A lot of people have chronic back pain, knee pain, neck pain, whatever pain, right? The Buddha said, once we're born, we're guaranteed to age, not even get old, just age, right? If we're getting old, then good for you, right? So we're guaranteed age, we're guaranteed sickness, right? Pain, discomfort, illness, and we're guaranteed death. That's what we get. Fun thing we signed up for, right? Now, in between all of that is a lot of beautiful moments and happiness and joy and excitement and, love and all that stuff. But specifically with pain, so let's just say you have chronic back pain. And you recognize that when you sit in meditation or when you sit on your couch or when you go for a walk, you're just in constant physical pain. The first arrow is the physical pain. The second arrow is, I'm angry that I have physical pain. So now you have physical pain and you're angry. Now because you're angry, you just start getting depressed. So now you're depressed and angry and have physical back pain. Now that you're depressed and angry and have pain, you start getting sad. Now you're sad and depressed and angry, and you still have physical back pain. Right? So all of those emotions, all those extra arrows, don't change the physical pain. It just changes our emotional response to it. For me as a practice, anytime you have any sort of physical pain, emotional as well, but just using physical as an example, because emotional pain comes and goes, physical pain sometimes is there for good. But even when it's there for good, it can get worse. So no matter how much chronic physical back pain you have, it can always get worse. So the emotional response to that physical pain is you have the opportunity to say, this hurts, but it could be so much worse. And then your emotions towards it is a little gentler, possibly. So just stick with the first arrow. And I like to use that teaching not just with physical pain, but also with mental, emotional pain, because those are as impermanent as anything. Right? The happiness, the sadness, the joy, the sorrow, the pain, the pleasure, they will come and go always. So when we find ourselves just emotionally destroyed, mentally destroyed, impermanence is your best friend. Because it's going to change. It'll go away. That moment you're sad and depressed and you go, all of life sucks and everything's got to end, that'll change. And then you'll be really happy and everything's going great and you're like, man, I love life. Guess what? That's also going to change. But that's the adventure that we get. That's the journey. And once we cannot attach to the wanting it to be one way or the other, we just experience life. And I think coming back to the story at the beginning about the guy who, he said he gets up at 3:30 and he says, I don't know why. Because he's not there to know why. He's just there to experience whatever is going on. And we have a really hard time experiencing what's going on. We have an easy time trying to understand what's going on, trying to analyze what's going on, trying to tell everybody what's going on. But can you actually just experience life as it occurs? So, yeah. What else?
Can you talk a little bit about, like you've talked about it in the past, and I feel like I need a recount of Buddhism being a rebellion, and maybe tie that into like action versus inaction in regards to like when to confront something and when not to.
Yeah. So the first thing about Buddhism, as you said, your comment about Buddhism being kind of like this rebellious thing. And to start with that, I mean, the Buddha was a prince, as you know. He had everything, all the wealth, all the riches, all the women, everything. And dude was like set up, right? And he rebelled against that life. He knew that there was something different for him. And he knew that none of that, of what he had that would seem to bring somebody so much happiness and pleasure, brought him that. And he wanted to figure out how to end suffering. So he rebelled against this life that he had. Now he was super privileged in every way and had it all. But he still rebelled against his life, right? I mean, dude was a prince and bailed on his father who was a king and wanted him to rule. And came back as like this peaceful, enlightened dude, right? Probably not what the father wanted. Definitely not what the father wanted. That's why the father sheltered him for 29 years and never let him outside the palace, right? He wanted him to never see old age, never see sickness, never see death. He knew that Siddhartha had such a big heart that if he saw the pain and suffering in the world, he would want to do something to change it. And so he just rebelled against his life. I often also talk about it, and I'm not sure if you were bringing it up in this context or not, but to the fact that when he became a monk and ordained other monks, it was a boys' club, meaning there were no nuns. Women were not allowed to ordain. And his stepmother, who raised him, really, or his aunt who raised him became his mother. His mother died 7 days after he was born, Siddhartha. And so his aunt, his mother's sister, married his father and raised him, like her child. And so when he came back at 35 after roaming the base of the Himalayan mountains for 6 years, and he figured out why we suffer, and he came back to teach that, they came to him and she wanted to ordain and become a nun. And he said, no, this is men only. And one of his disciples went to him and said, do women not have the same ability to awaken as men do? He said, yeah. And so, there's no equality today. There was no equality 2,500, gender equality 2,500 years ago in India, definitely not. And there is none today. But at that time, to allow women, and yes, I use the word allow, right? Because that's in essence what he did. To allow women to ordain was very much rebelling against the common way at that time. I think his entire life was rebellious. So I think that's really beautiful. I think that's, takes a lot of courage, a lot of strength, a lot of fearlessness, all those words you kind of hear in Buddhism. And then, just to share that way of life with people was not easy. But to the second part around kind of confronting conflict or not, when to speak up, when to stay quiet, you've heard me long enough. I'm always a fan of speaking up. I'm not a fan of silence when, silence causes more harm. But I'm also a fan of making sure everybody is safe in any situation. And we don't always know the outcome, right? Sometimes we speak up thinking we're going to keep something safe or someone safe and make it better, and maybe it gets worse. Sometimes we remain silent thinking the silence is going to make things better and keep somebody safe, and maybe it gets worse. We don't know. That's the harsh reality, is we don't always know when it's best to speak up and when it's best to stay quiet. And there's no description of exactly how and when to do that, other than trusting what's in your heart, what's in your mind, what you think is right, and hopefully having enough wisdom to try to see what are possible outcomes that could occur. And sometimes speaking up will lead to a lot of things that you might not want, and you have to be prepared for that. But silence, not always so golden, So, yeah.
Yeah, my first realization of Buddhism when I was a kid was the monks burning themselves in Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't understand it then, I can't understand it now.
Yeah, so let me just gently touch on the idea of monks setting themselves on fire. Man, this is a heavy one.
It was upsetting as a child.
Yeah, I can imagine, yes. So those who haven't seen it, Vietnam War, the images of the monks, and I won't, one famous one, I won't attempt to say his name because I wouldn't say it properly, but there's one really famous. And this is a really difficult one for anyone to understand, but especially, I believe, Western folks to understand who do not, for the most part, believe in reincarnation or rebirth. Right? So this was an act in protest coming from a place of understanding that the consciousness was going to continue on. I say this with a huge asterisk because probably every single person in this room is not coming from this place where you think that if you do this act that you're going to be reborn, right? From a Buddhist lens, when we think of suicide, right? And let me put a little bit of context around this very briefly for those who are maybe new. In India, 2,500 years ago, 500 years before Christ, pretty much everybody at that time believed in rebirth or reincarnation or a continuation of consciousness. If you went up to somebody then and said you got one life and then you go into heaven or hell, they would have thought you were crazy. Okay? Fast forward to today, you tell people you're going to be reborn, and they're like, huh? So he was teaching at a time where the view was very different. That was what he was teaching. He wasn't teaching just so you could all be happy and peaceful and enjoy your lattes, right? He was teaching because people wanted to be free from suffering, and the only way to be free from suffering was to be free from the cycle of rebirth. How many of you showed up here today because you wanted to make sure you're not reborn? Nobody. You showed up here because you're sad or angry or lonely or depressed or stressed out or anxious or your back hurts or whatever it is. Or you're just bored. I don't know, right? Whatever you showed up here for, that's why you showed up. But it wasn't having to do with rebirth. At that time, and historically for all the Buddhist teachings, right? What I look at as cultural Buddhism outside of Western Buddhism, they all believe in rebirth, reincarnation, and continuation of consciousness, and still do today. So in the mind of that monk at that time, not that I can pretend to know what's in his mind, but the way they saw the world was, this is just a physical form. This consciousness is going to continue. And that act is coming from that place. Suicide, in the way that we tend to look at it, what happens at the time of death and where your mind is at is really important. Is it filled with anger and hatred and rage? Or is it filled with compassion, loving kindness, and understanding? Nobody can ever speak to what was in that monk or the monks' minds when they did that, right? But think about, even if you don't, which is, again, for most Western folks, not there, you don't have to believe in rebirth, reincarnation to practice Buddhism. You just think of it as every day. Think of it as every moment. You ever woken up and been in a really good mood? Once in a while, remember that day like 7 years ago, right? You woke up, you were in a really good mood.
I was younger.
You were younger, and it lasted for a little bit of time, right? And then what happened to that really good mood? It eventually what? Turned into a bad mood. You ever woken up and been in a really bad mood? And that bad mood tends to stay for a little bit, and then that goes away. So I think of rebirth from a practical sense of just our moment-to-moment emotional states. And if we start the day in a good mood, it'll continue in a good mood even for a little bit. If we start the day in a bad mood, it'll continue for a bad mood even for a little bit. Time of death, that's what's carrying on. What's in the mind. So, that's the best I can express on that. Yeah. There was a hand in the back there. I just see it attached to a white shirt. There you go. Yeah.
Can you speak a little bit about enlightenment?
About what?
Enlightenment?
No. The question was, can I speak a little bit? I'm glad you only asked me to speak a little bit about enlightenment versus a lot about enlightenment. So, one of my favorite expressions around enlightenment is it's a Zen kind of quote. And it says, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. So for those who may be newer to Buddhism, there's this idea, right, that like enlightenment, ending of suffering, nirvana, right, that we're like chasing this thing. If you are chasing enlightenment, if you are chasing nirvana, you will never get there. The Buddha, in fact, said that we are all already enlightened. Or awakened, whatever word you want to use, right? It's called bodhicitta, Buddha nature. We all have it. We are all already there. The good news is, you're already enlightened. Isn't this so easy? You just showed up and you're enlightened, right? You're already there. But the metaphor that I love is the sun, right? So on a cloudy day, is the sun there? Can you see it? No, why not? It's obscured. It's covered by the clouds. Clouds part, the sun is still there. The sun is always there. The clouds cover it. That enlightenment, that enlightened nature, that bodhicitta, that Buddha nature is all already within us. We just got a lot of clouds. The clouds are greed, anger, ignorance, craving, desire, all these things that we chase and seek all day long that cause our suffering. Those are our clouds. So enlightenment isn't something that you get to. It's a moment of being free from all these clouds. So I've read. Because I have no idea what that's like. Does that help? All right. I just saw 2 thumbs. Yeah, in the back.
We were talking a little bit about, you were talking a little bit about, Eastern versus Western Buddhism, believing it reincarnated, we might over here see this one go. I was just wondering, if this is a Buddhist temple, right? I'm sorry, it's my first time here.
Nice. Welcome. Sorry you got stuck in the back corner.
It's okay, I wanted to stay.
Okay.
I noticed the cross on top.
Yeah. This is an easy one. Yeah. Go ahead.
Both.
Say again.
So it's both?
It's both what?
I don't feel like a church in a Buddhist temple. Am I missing a symbol?
And I'm Jewish, so we're screwed. So, this is let me just try to paraphrase that for the people virtually. So it's your first time here. I was talking about Buddhism, Eastern, Western. This is a Buddhist temple, and you almost said that like it was a question, like, is this a Buddhist temple? And then you referenced the cross on top. So this building was built in 1927. Well, you are at a Buddhist temple, so we can get that out of the way, yes. You came to the right place.
That would have been awkward.
Yeah, it would have been really weird, right? When we were downtown for 10 years, and in 2017 we bought this building. This was Swedenborgian congregation. Emanuel Swedenborg was a Christian mystic from the 1700s. This was their community, their congregation that came together in the 20s, and they built this place, 1927. 2015, 16, it went on the market. They were going to tear it down. We were able to purchase it, and here we are. So we've been here 7 years, and we've always left the cross up. It may come down soon at some point, but we really wanted to honor the tradition and history of what was here, because we felt like, and from the moment we walked in here, this place was special, sacred, and magical. We just added the Buddhas, right, and the people. It was a congregation that really kind of dwindled. They couldn't keep it up. They just couldn't keep it going. And the reverend who was here was actually really cool. Jonathan, he was the reverend of the Swedenborgian group that was here. And he was also a member of the Japanese Buddhist temple downtown. And when we found out about this building, I was like, all right, Swedenborg, I just wanted to know what they did in this church for 90 years. Not everything, but a general idea, because it felt great. And so I spent 20 minutes on Google learning all about Emanuel Swedenborg. And it turns out Christian mysticism and Buddhism have a lot of similarities, right? The book that I came across, which I never read, I just came across it enough to know that we should try to get this place, was written about 200 years later in 1900 somewhere. D.T. Suzuki wrote a book titled Swedenborg, Buddha of the North. And what this Japanese Zen priest Buddhist scholar said is, all of you Western folks who are into Buddhism, you should actually read the teachings of Emanuel Swedenborg. So I never read the teachings of Emanuel Swedenborg. I was already Buddhist, but it made us feel comfortable coming into this space, because we felt like they were here for 95 years. Developers, it was never registered historic, so developers would have torn it down and turned it into condos. And that was the last thing this building should have become, was condos. We do need more housing. Housing that people can afford would be nice, but so that's why the cross is there.
Thank you.
Yeah. Welcome to the Dharma Bum Temple. But to expand on it as well, just for your kind of information, when we started the temple, again, 17 years ago, we're not one specific lineage or sect of Buddhism. So we're not a Zen temple, we're not Theravada, we're not Mahayana, we're not Tibetan. We bring in all the different schools of Buddhist practice here, led by lay people, with monks and nuns and lamas and, guest speakers like that. But all the stuff we do here is just led by regular unenlightened fools like myself. So, yeah. What else? In case any of you heard me laugh, it's because Brad gave me an update on the Cubs score right here, so that was fun. Thanks, Brad. Yeah, hand in the back.
Yeah, in the beginning you made reference to no gift, no giver, no receiver. Can
Yeah.
you talk about that some more, please?
Yeah, no, it wasn't that clear, huh? Yeah, so I'll kind of, I think, close with this teaching, and I know I kind of touched on it very briefly, but so Bodhisattva, Bodhi is enlightened, Sattva is being, and the practice of the Bodhisattva, which is this Samantapadra Bodhisattva over here, the 6 tusks represent the 6 Paramitas. Paramita loosely translates to perfection, but it's the practices of generosity, morality, patience, diligence, concentration, and wisdom. This is the practice of the Bodhisattva, right? And so the teaching within the Bodhisattva path and practice is when it comes to giving, right? Time, attention, heart, smile, whatever. You ever give something to somebody and they gave you nothing back? They didn't thank you? You're still waiting for that thank you card from the gift you spent, whatever on 12 years ago? All the times you've given something to somebody and they gave you nothing in return, how did that make you feel? According to Buddhist teachings on the Bodhisattva path, true generosity is non-attachment to the gift. To the giver, which is yourself, or the receiver, the person who received the gift. It is the simple, kind of coming back to your question about, with the intention. The intention. There was a Tibetan Lama years ago, a Sri Lankan monk years ago, shared a great example. And he said, imagine buying a bike for, the first bicycle for a child. Maybe it's your child, maybe it's somebody else's child. And you're out shopping, back when people actually went places to shop. And you're going to buy a bike, and you're really excited for this bike. Like, you feel pleasant. So pleasant before. Then you buy the bike, and you're really happy, stoked buying the bike. You feel pleasant during. You give the bike away to the child. You see the child ride off on the bike. They probably fall a couple times, whatever. But you feel pleasant before, pleasant during, and pleasant after. This is true generosity. This is giving without any attachment whatsoever to the sense of self, of me. Very often we give a gift and we're waiting. Say again? And we're waiting for something, even if it's a thank you. Now, I get it. It's polite to say thank you. I'm not suggesting that when you receive gifts, you're like, well, I'm Buddhist, I don't say thank you. Right? I'm not suggesting that we change manners and things like that, but when we give a gift to somebody, can we just give a gift for the sake of giving the gift without the attachment of wanting something in return? No strings attached. And most of us, kind of going back to my original comment, we don't. We're not that way. And I get it in relationships, it's a give and take, it's a partnership, whatever it is. And so, yes, you're in a healthy way, you're going to have things that you expect in return from other people. I'm not suggesting that in a practical sense that it's wrong to have those expectations or desires to want to be treated a certain way. But no matter how much you want somebody to treat you a certain way, doesn't mean they're going to treat you that way. They're going to treat you however they want to treat you. That's up to them. What's up to you is whether you choose to stay in that situation or go. That's up to you. So, in every exchange, if we can approach these exchanges beyond this idea of what am I getting, what am I giving, who's involved, you're not attached. And non-attachment doesn't mean you don't care. Doesn't mean you don't love. It doesn't mean you're not, still kind. It just means you're not attached. You've given it, And that true generosity, pleasant before, pleasant during, pleasant after, is liberating. Right? I mean, the first noble truth, life is dukkha, filled with suffering. The second is the cause. Literally, the very first cause of suffering, according to the Buddha, is greed. And then anger, and then ignorance. So the practice is generosity, compassion, and wisdom to overcome greed, anger, and ignorance. You've all given stuff to people before. right? It feels good. So give your time, give your attention, give your heart, help other people. The Buddha said the greatest gift is the gift of the Dharma. And he didn't necessarily mean like, giving some Dharma talk. But when you share loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity, when you share patience and understanding and forgiveness with others, that's the best gift you can give. That's the practice. And even back to the question about the cross, that has nothing to do with being Buddhist. Doesn't matter if you're a Christian, Catholic, Muslim, Jewish, pagan, Mormon. The one who's here for the first time, ask the question about the cross. Did you leave already? You're still here.
I'm here.
Can you stand up for a second? I just wanted to show you something. What's your name?
I'm Shay.
Say again?
Shay.
Shay. Welcome, Shay. I just want to show you something. For example, all of you who are Buddhist, raise your hand. Do you see any hands? I saw like 2. And then usually the one who's not sure. So, back to your question, I mean this very seriously. It's a Buddhist temple in an old Christian church filled with people who are not Buddhist. People don't come here to be Buddhist. We don't care if you're Buddhist. Whatever religion you have or don't have, keep it.
I'm an atheist.
There you go. Just be nice. Be a nice atheist. Don't be a pissed off, angry atheist who hates everyone who's not an atheist. I'm not talking about you.
I'm an agnostic atheist.
There you go. Right? So that's the idea, is to just, the practice is the kindness. So I just wanted you to see that no hands went up. Yeah, does that help on the question of no gift, no giver, no receiver?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to close on that. We'll join palms. May the benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May all beings be free from suffering. May all beings be at peace. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to those who need it most. All right, just before you all head out, we'll have Molly do a few announcements.
Hi everyone, I'm Molly. We opened the Dharma Bum Temple 17 years ago to introduce Buddhist practice to those who show up. Those who lead are not nuns, monks, gurus, masters, or teachers, and are not looking for students. They are simply practitioners sharing their interpretation of the practice. Every night, we have different classes led by different people from various Buddhist traditions. We have a recovery sangha that meets several times a week for anyone with addiction, and our food redistribution program is every Thursday at 4:30 p.m. We have classes and programs every day, and everything we offer here is always free. The full schedule is on our website and also posted in the entryway above the shoe rack. We have a lending library, and if you see a book you like, feel free to borrow it, then bring it back whenever you're done with it. Please straighten your seat or cushion before you head out. If a few people could stay to close and latch the windows, that would be helpful. Thank you for being here.